Hello and welcome to the Unit 6 craft lecture, which is about drafting sub-skills. Going from a blank screen to a full-length research paper can seem like an impossible lift, and indeed it pretty much is. But when writers use a process approach that incorporates brainstorming, researching, and outlining stages, these pre-writing exercises erect a ramp that make the writing process a relatively leisurely stroll. As in physics, when the work is spread out over time, the energy expenditure involved in rolling your essay up to the top of the hill is much more manageable. If you have been following this process, you should already have most of the ideas, brainstorming, information, research, and plans, outlining, you need to draft out your essay. Writers who engage in a particularly robust outlining process may already have many sentences or even paragraphs of their essay already written, and the rest of the drafting process should just be a matter of translating the outline's bullet points into sentences and paragraphs and connecting the rhetorical dots. At the same time, even a writer who has erected a sturdy on-ramp into the drafting stage of writing may feel some trepidation when the actual writing begins. So far, all of the work has been speculative, imaginative, and hypothetical. Once the sentences start getting typed out into paragraphs, writers sometimes feel, the stuff gets real, uncomfortably real, leading to all sorts of mental pretzeling and self-psyching out. As I have mentioned previously, some of this anxiety is inevitable. Any writer who is writing something worthwhile is likely working at the edge of their abilities, pushing themselves a little further outside of their standard intellectual comfort zone. That's what writing is, and how it makes us learn and grow. As a writer, if you are not a little bit anxious, you are not challenging yourself enough. Advanced writers, however, recognize that writing is not entirely a black box of mystery, although in some ways it is. In many ways, writing is just a matter of following the rules. If you know what the rules are, the rules can guide you at every step of the way, supplying you with practical solutions to the specific kinds of puzzles that drafting a research paper presents. The rules won't tell you exactly what to say at any given point in your essay, but they can usually tell you the kind of thing that you should be saying if you want your essay to look and sound like a formal piece of professional writing. Some of these points will be familiar from the Unit 1 lecture on the goal of completeness in writing, but they are all important enough to reiterate, take to heart, and practice regularly. Writing a first sentence and an introduction. In many ways, the first sentence of an essay is the hardest sentence to write. It is here that you suddenly have to break the silence and commit to having a particular discussion in a particular voice. Once you write your first sentence, it becomes easier to use it as a bridge to the next sentence and the next, creating a sense of momentum that can propel a writer along. But that first step can sometimes be very hard to take. As you have probably heard, there are a number of introductory strategies that writers frequently employ to jump-start the process of beginning a piece of writing. It can sometimes be helpful to start off with a relevant anecdote about a relevant situation that introduces a main theme of your essay. Stories are usually easy to tell, and they help a writer to make a human connection with a reader. Sometimes a particularly relevant and thought-provoking quotation can provide a starting point for a series of reflections that will bring the discussion around to the thesis of the essay. Some writers like to begin by throwing out a startling fact or figure to highlight the urgency of the conversation they wish to have, while other writers just cut to the chase, beginning their essay with a clear statement of their essay's thesis. All of these techniques are effective insofar as they get the ball rolling for both the writer and the reader, smashing through the silence and the inertia with a specific series of assertions that lead up to a thesis statement. As we discussed in reference to outlining, the thesis statement is the guiding star of your essay. A thesis statement doesn't have to be very specific or very original to be effective. It only has to state the overall purpose of the essay. Express the central purpose of your essay in a single sentence, and that sentence is your thesis statement. Eating organic food will make you healthier, smarter, and happier. Play-based learning is an emerging trend in education. Learning about specific drafting sub-skills can improve your writing. Whatever it is, the clearer I can articulate the thesis statement, the more useful it will be as a yardstick for assessing whether my essay is on track or whether it is veering off course. The thesis statement serves the same purpose for your reader, who will look to this thesis statement as a signpost about what to expect from your essay. The classic strategy for academic and professional writers, therefore, is to plant this thesis statement very prominently at the end of the essay's introductory paragraph. An introductory paragraph, therefore, is basically a sandwich, with your introductory strategy taking up the first third of the paragraph, your thesis statement taking up the bottom third, and the middle third consisting of whatever connective tissue is necessary for you as the writer to build a bridge between the two sides. Given the anxiety that first sentences and first paragraphs often arouse in writers, some writers find it helpful to write the body of their essay before writing the introduction, which is perfectly fine. Other writers find it helpful to write a dummy intro as a placeholder just to get the drafting process started, with the intention of going back and replacing it with something more permanent after more of the body's essay has been written. Either way, it is always the case that any effective piece of writing, even a memo or long email, will always include an introductory paragraph that performs the two jobs of introducing the topic and explaining in encapsulated form what the writer has to say about it. 2. The formula of a body paragraph. Aside from the introductory paragraph and the concluding paragraph, which have their own unique character, every paragraph of academic or professional prose has a standardized anatomy that is just as much a part of the grammar of written communication as correct spelling and complete sentences. Like an academic essay at the macro scale, academic paragraphs also have three distinct parts. As we discussed in Unit 1, body paragraphs begin with a topic sentence, which acts as the thesis of the paragraph. Their middles consist of observations that support the topic sentence, and their final sentences, if they are well-written paragraphs, will consist of a statement that sums up the relevant information discussed in the paragraph. As we discussed in the outlining lecture, the topic sentence of a paragraph is the entire paragraph in utero. An effective topic sentence will make it easy for a reader and a writer to predict what kinds of information will be presented in the paragraph without going into too much detail. It is important to note that a topic sentence itself usually does not convey much new information. For the first sentence in a paragraph, the primary job is not to convey new information, but to act as a guidepost, signaling what kind of information is to be found inside the paragraph. By themselves, topic sentences tend to be obvious and even banal. For example, several studies have shown that an organic diet can reduce the risk of diabetes. Or, some critics have questioned the value of a play-based curriculum. These topic sentences don't say anything about specific studies or specific critics. They just set the stage for the middle sentences, which will provide more detailed information supporting these claims. Supporting information. A clear topic sentence will tell the reader what they can expect to read in the body of a paragraph, and it will also tell the writer what they have to include in order to follow through with the topic sentence's claim. If I wrote that several studies have shown that an organic diet can reduce the risk of diabetes, presumably I am sitting on at least 2 or 3 specific studies that I can describe in the body of the paragraph. Since the paragraph itself is probably only around 200 or 250 words, this means that I have about 2 or 3 sentences to describe each study and to explain how the study shows what my topic sentence says it shows. If I find that there is one specific study that I want to discuss at greater length, I can butt it off into its own paragraph with its own similarly undetailed thesis statement, something like, one study in particular suggests the powerful effects an organic diet can have in reducing the risk associated with diabetes. Then I can use the complete paragraph to provide a detailed description and analysis of this particular study. The important thing is that the content of a paragraph is reliably identified in the first sentence. If you write a paragraph that starts to stray away from the topic sentence, it is either time to start a new paragraph or to reword the topic sentence so that it can encompass the new elements you have added to the paragraph. Closing remark. The last sentence of a paragraph presents an opportunity for a kind of head check for both the writer and the reader. Like the first sentence of a paragraph, the last sentence of a paragraph should generally avoid bringing up new information. Its role is primarily structural. For the writer, it is a chance to think about the paragraph as a whole and to answer one burning question. How does the information contained in this paragraph advance the thesis of my essay? If I have spent 200 words describing a specific study about organic food and diabetes, this last sentence will be my chance to bring this discussion back around to the thesis of my essay and to tie the main point of this paragraph to the main point of my essay. Studies such as these illustrate the remarkable health impacts that can result from eating organic food. If you want a formula for writing effective closing remarks for body paragraphs, it would look something like this. Topic sentence of body paragraph plus thesis statement of essay equals closing remark of body paragraph. These closing remarks play an important role for the reader as well, providing plateaus in your essay where the reader can stop and look around at where they've come and think about why they've come here. Thinking about the structural pattern of a body paragraph can help to define what exactly your essay should be doing, often on a sentence-by-sentence level. Once you internalize these rules, the formula itself will do a lot of the work of writing and thinking for you, telling you directly what needs to go where and why. 3. Using sources. The middle sections of your body paragraphs are likely to contain references to specific research sources. These research sources play a vital role in connecting your own observations to the research and writing that is currently being done by the academic and professional community at large, and they also function to reinforce your own authority and credibility. For ethical reasons, it is obviously important to convey the findings of other researchers accurately in your own writing, to make sure that the authors of your sources get full credit for all of the information and perspectives they have supplied to your own writing, and to always verify that you have avoided any whiff of plagiarism. When in doubt, cite it. If you are using someone else's words, put quotation marks around the words and cite the quotation. If you're referring to a piece of information that you wouldn't have if you hadn't seen it in a source, cite the source. That said, there are 4 different ways that writers refer to sources in their writing, and they each have their own function and their own rules. Alluding to a source. Sometimes an academic or professional writer will simply refer to a source without going into detail or even mentioning the source in the text of the essay. Here's an example. Recent research has highlighted the evident health benefits of an organic diet. Smith, 2015. Jones and Johnson, 2017. As this research continues, health advocates have had mixed success in communicating these discoveries to the public. So here I haven't actually mentioned Smith or Jones and Johnson in the actual text of my essay. I just plug them here into the in-text citation, and that's all I'm going to say about any of these sources in the whole paper. The function of such citations is simply to communicate to your readers that you are aware that a certain topic is under discussion among professional researchers, and to provide a source of further information for readers who want to dig deeper into that particular aspect of your discussion. Such a citation makes no demand on the writer to go into any further detail about the sources themselves. Using a source to confirm a fact. A much more directed way of referring to a source is to use information from the source as evidence for a specific fact-based claim you are making. So here's an example. Research has shown that adherence to an organic diet can reduce one's risk of heart disease. Jones and Johnson, 2017, found that 63% of subjects who adopted an organic diet experienced reduced arterial plaque and lower blood pressure. In this case, there is one very specific statistic I wanted to pluck out of the Jones and Johnson article in order to shore up the body of this paragraph about heart disease. The 63% statistic, which I made up by the way, just to be clear, serves the function of supporting my claim that organic food helps to prevent heart disease. Once I use this one statistic, I may have no more use for Jones and Johnson. I have scavenged the statistic that I needed, and now I can move on to making my next point. Paraphrasing. But a writer may also become more involved with a particular source. Rather than simply alluding to a source in passing or cherry-picking a source for a useful statistic, a writer may choose to grapple at length with a particular source that bears some important connection to the writer's own research question. In order to write about a source, however, it is necessary to provide a brief description of the source, translating the language of the source into your own language, a process known as paraphrasing. Here's an example. Johnson and Jones, 2017, conducted a study of college undergraduates intended to test the impact that converting to an organic diet would have on their coronary health. Their research concluded that 63% of those who adopted an organic diet saw a decrease in arterial plaque and lower blood pressure, page 314. While this is certainly an impressive finding, the study is flawed by a number of factors which, taken together, might suggest that the numbers underrepresent the impact that this diet had on the heart health of the study's subjects. In this passage, I have not included any direct quotes from Johnson and Jones, but I am discussing their study in my own words, going into detail about how this study looks from the perspective of my thesis. Engaging sources in this way can generate content for entire paragraphs or even series of paragraphs from a single source, allowing you to bounce off the findings of other researchers to articulate your own intellectual trajectory. Quoting. The most direct way to refer to the writings of another researcher is to quote directly from your sources. Sentences or parts of sentences that convey the main point of a particular article or that provide a starting point for your own speculations can be particularly fruitful when brought into your essay as quotes. The important thing about quoting other researchers, however, is to avoid simply plopping a quote from one writer down into your own paragraph as if it were an accessory or ornament. A useful or resonant quotation shouldn't just be an add-on, it should be a starting point for your own writing. Think of quotations not as one sentence in your essay, but as at least three. Every time you use a quotation from a source, it is useful to think of it as a three-part process. One sentence introduces the quote and prepares us for it, building a bridge from whatever we were talking about previously to the quote itself. Then there is the quote. Then there is a sentence of analysis that explains why the quote was worth quoting. Here's an example. One pair of researchers, Johnson and Jones from the Goodwin College Health Institute, have become convinced that organic food should play a central role in promoting coronary fitness. Converting to an organic diet, these researchers assert, is one of the most effective lifestyle changes that a person can make to improve their heart health. 2017, page 334. Their research has convinced Johnson and Jones of the transformative potency of eating organic, and this attitude is becoming more commonly accepted among doctors, nutritionists, and consumers. Notice the way the quote is now framed by a mini introduction and conclusion that clarify the role that the quotation plays in my own argument. Notice also that I have manipulated the quote somewhat to make it fit into the rhythm of my own sentences, breaking it up with my own words. The rule with quotations is that less is more. A quotation should generally never go on for more than a sentence or two, and for every sentence that you quote, you should supply at least one sentence of your own commentary, clarifying why and how the quoted words are relevant to what you're saying in your essay. Advanced writers make sure that the quotations they use are always framed in this way. This kind of usage ensures that quoted material will be a stimulant to the writer's own thinking rather than a substitute for it. Most research papers will use a mixture of these different techniques of referencing other sources, making a passing allusion to one source here, cherry-picking a data point from another source there, paraphrasing a source in one paragraph, and quoting another source in the next paragraph. These techniques can also be combined and blended. Knowing how you want to use a source will make it easier for you to integrate other writers' ideas into your own discussion. 4. Drawing out ideas. An idea is a precious thing, and cultivating, nourishing, and disseminating ideas is what writing is all about. It's why you are taking this class, and it's why strings of letters have the power to change the world. The moment you have an idea is a sacred one, full of promise and potential. Too many times, most of the time in fact, our ideas flicker through our brains and then disappear into the ether, or sink back into the subconscious to get recycled into other ideas. Writing, however, is a process that allows people to catch their ideas, to invite them to stay, to make a place where they can play and grow, reproduce, mutate, and evolve. All of the brainstorming, research, and outlining you have done in preparation to write has been, in part, a way of preparing your brain to do the kind of idea formation that writing facilitates. As you draft out the sentences of your essay, you may discover that new connections between ideas, new implications of what you are saying, and new perspectives and questions are occurring to you. This happens naturally as a byproduct of the process of generating sentences. A certain word that you use in a sentence might provoke another related idea, or a sentence might leave a thought in midair which then suggests the necessity of a follow-up sentence. These thoughts may or may not coincide perfectly with the plan laid out in your outline, but advanced writers sniff out moments like this the way a pig sniffs for truffles, and when they find that they are having a new idea, or they sense that a new idea might be on the cusp of forming, they follow where the scent leads. The best advice for the writer immersed in the process of drafting out an essay is to follow your ideas, and keep following the trail as long as you can, until the idea exhausts itself, or until you can bring your ideas back around to the point that you were making when the idea first occurred to you. Ideas are the heart and soul of writing. If you have one, don't let go. See where it takes you. The best writing that you do will be the writing you do while you are pursuing an original train of thought. You can always go back and edit out sentences that seem like they have strayed too far from the topic sentence of a paragraph to fit naturally with the rest of your essay, although save them, since who knows, you might use these ideas as the seeds for a future writing project. And sometimes writers even reconceptualize an entire piece of writing around the kinds of insights that came out spontaneously while they were writing the draft. The optimal situation, of course, is when your own inspiration as a writer corresponds with the outline that you are working on, allowing you to achieve a homeostatic balance between the spontaneity of creative idea formation and the predictability of a proportional structure. 5. Moving from one point to another. A piece of academic or professional writing has two basic kinds of sentences: sentences that provide information and sentences that act as connective tissue. A writer's outline is likely to focus on specific pieces of information that the writer intends to include in an essay, and these pieces of information translate pretty easily into complete sentences that will fill the bodies of the body paragraphs. The emphasis of the drafting stage of writing, however, is on generating the connective tissue that will hold all the parts together and allow them to work in relation to one another as a complete unit. Depending on the nature of a particular piece of writing, the ratio of informational sentences to connective sentences may be as high as 50-50, meaning that as much as half of the sentences in the essay may exist entirely for the purpose of holding things together. Introductory paragraphs and concluding paragraphs are all connective tissue, as are the topic sentences and concluding remarks of most paragraphs. As you write these sections of your essay, use them to guide your reader from one room of your essay to another. If you have written a clear outline based on a template structure, you will already have a sense of why your guests are moving through your rooms in a particular order. You will write sentences like, "Another reason that this trend is alarming is because," or "After the fast progress of this trend in the early 20th century, the mid-century period was characterized by mounting skepticism," or "As the problems associated with this trend continue to proliferate, researchers and practitioners have investigated a number of promising solutions." If, as you are writing, you discover that it is difficult to get from one idea to another, it may be a sign that you may want to rethink your outline, or move your body paragraphs around so that they flow more naturally from one to the next. But it is also the case that some creative connective tissue weaving can help you get from anywhere to almost anywhere else, as long as you are clear-eyed about where you are coming from, where you need to get to, and why you want to go in this direction. It is also important to incorporate connective tissue into the bodies of your paragraphs as well, in order to clarify for your reader why you are moving from one point to the next within a paragraph. The most useful tip for a writer trying to provide a sense of flow from one part of their essay to the next is to think about writing as talking through your ideas rather than just spitting them out. It may be helpful to imagine that you are speaking to someone who cares about what you are writing about, but who doesn't know nearly as much as you do about it. Some people find it useful to think about their best friend or their mom as an ideal audience. Keeping this audience in mind can help you remember that your reader does not know everything that you know about the topic. You need to introduce ideas before you analyze them. You need to say who certain researchers are before you begin discussing their studies. You need to explain why it makes sense to transition from talking about the topic of paragraph 8 to talking about the topic of paragraph 9. The key to writing effective connective sentences is empathizing with your reader, trying to see your discussion from their point of view, and trying to welcome them into your ideas. If you can't explain why you are jumping from the subject of paragraph 8 to the subject of paragraph 9, you probably don't understand it yourself, and you either need to figure it out or rethink your organizational strategy. Some writers fear that connective sentences are fluff or padding, since they don't convey hard data. But in the same way that human beings would just be a pile of disconnected bits if they lost all of their tendons, ligaments, cartilage, and bone, an essay without connective tissue is just a list of random pieces of information. Advanced writers know that the connective tissue is just as important, and in a way more important, than the elements that the connective tissue connects. 6. Writing a final paragraph. In the same way that formal writing should always begin with some kind of introduction, it should always end with a concluding paragraph. Student writers are often under the impression that the concluding paragraph of an essay is a mere formality, and that its function is simply to reiterate the thesis of the essay. Advanced writers, however, recognize the rhetorical significance of a concluding paragraph. It is true that a concluding paragraph should echo the thesis articulated in the first paragraph. We want some kind of assurance that writers take us where they said they were going to take us, that the promise of the introduction has been fulfilled. But a good conclusion is more than a dead echo. It is a living reflection on what the entire journey has meant, why we should care about it, and where we might go from here. Lawyers know that the closing argument of a court trial is the best chance they will have at winning a jury over to their side. They will inevitably remind the jury of their thesis, my client is innocent, but they will also take the opportunity provided by the closing remarks to consolidate the evidence presented over the course of the trial, to make an appeal to the jurors' sympathy and humanity, and to reflect on the big picture and wider significance of the trial itself. At the same time, this final statement must communicate a firm sense of closure, that the complete argument has been presented, and that the particular speech act of the client's defense has come to an end. The same imperatives apply to writers drafting out the final paragraph of an essay. Bringing the argument back around to the thesis is an essential first step of a successful conclusion, but an advanced conclusion will also address at least some of these questions. How has the evidence presented helped to demonstrate or fulfill the essay's thesis? Why should the reader care about this topic? How is the topic of this essay part of a wider discussion? What is the ultimate significance of this topic? Based on what has been discussed in this essay, what can we expect in the immediate and long-term future? To some extent, it may be useful to think of the final paragraph of an essay as a slightly different writing project. Rather than presenting information, a good conclusion is a kind of reflective essay on the nature and meaning of the essay itself. It is an opportunity to meditate on what you learned as a result of writing this essay, and on what you hope your readers will take away from the experience of having read it. You might consider free writing around one of these 5 questions as a way of formulating and focusing your ideas about what you have written and what it means to you. Finally, a signature of advanced writing is an attention to endings. The final sentence of your essay should be one that resonates with your reader and that clearly indicates a sense of closure. Use this final sentence as a kind of exclamation point, signaling to your readers that you are done speaking and now it's their turn. Drafting an essay can be stressful, but as with any other activity, the more you practice the elemental sub-skills involved, the easier it is to feel confident and sure-footed. Writing takes place at the border of magic and design. While we often think of rules and creativity as being opposites, writing is a game where rules and structure serve to elicit and promote heightened creativity, and where the creative imagination can also manipulate rules and structures. One of the empowering things to keep in mind about the drafting process is that it's just a draft. As long as you are putting in a good faith effort into your writing draft, it will always be possible to continue to tweak it and refine it next week in the revision phase of the writing process.